Thanks for tuning in to the WingSpace Podcast. This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the WingSpace Podcast, a place to take up space. Welcome to Season 5, where we are focusing on the 5 pillars of wellness: nutrition, movement, sleep, stress, and relationships. And today I get to finish my conversation with Bridget, who is a nutritionist, personal trainer, and a kickboxing studio owner on the West Coast in California. Welcome back, Bridget. So glad to have you here.
Yay, I'm glad to be back.
So when we finished up our previous episode, we had started talking about implementation. You know, you can Google nutrition, you can Google movement, and you get thousands of results that pop up, and so many things are contradictory. So how do we implement? How do we overcome the struggles? And we were just kind of beginning to have that conversation. So I would love to hear some of your thoughts on getting started, kind of that implementation process, figuring out what works best for individual clients that you work with.
Yeah, so my big thing with my nutrition clients is when people come to me, most of the time it's weight loss. Not every time, but the majority of the time people are looking for weight loss, and they're looking for it to be fast, and they're looking for an entire life overhaul, and they want it to happen right now. The reality of it is, the slower you go, the simple changes that you make are going to give you the biggest impact. And a lot of people are really hesitant when I say the simplest change. A big one is, well, plan your meals ahead of time. And the fact that it's just so simple, people are resistant because they're like, that's not going to work. It's too simple. I'm going to have to go on this diet or drastically overhaul my entire life in order for this to happen. And I think this goes for like anything really, is that sometimes it's a simple change. It doesn't have to be a complete life overhaul in order to get results. Small, simple changes over time is what is key for all of these things.
You know, the majority of the work that I do, while I am a group fitness instructor, I'm not actively teaching right now. So the majority of the work that I do is from a mental health perspective and working with clients in a therapeutic setting. And I'm seeing the same thing. You know, people are coming in with whether it's a history of trauma or, you know, current life stressors, and they want to be able to, you know, sleep better and have no anxiety and not be angry and not feel depressed. And they want it to be overnight. And we start simple. And I find that the biggest obstacle is ourselves. That a therapist or a coach or a trainer can say, drink 8 extra ounces of water every day this week. And then at the end of the week, we're going to say it didn't work. But did we really drink 8 extra ounces of water?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that a lot with nutrition clients. I'm like, okay, all I want you to do is have a vegetable at dinner this week. And they're like, I'm not seeing results. And I'm like, well, did you have that one serving of vegetable at dinner every week? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, well, how are we going to move forward with other simple changes? Like, we have to get that one thing to be a habit so that you don't have to think about it every single time. And that goes with the 5 pillars. Once you get your nutrition under control, then you can get your movement under control. Once those 2 things become a habit, those are 2 things you don't have to think about anymore. Usually when those 2 things are under control, your stress goes down. Once you get your stress under control, then you can sleep better. But when it comes to relationships, that involves at least 2 people. So if those 4 things of you are not under control, that relationship is going to be even more difficult to get under control because you're not under control and you can't control what other people do. So it's like this give and take.
Well, and for me, I mean, I even talk about the idea that part of the relationship component is the relationship we have with ourselves.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
You know, how much are we lying or deceiving ourselves, not being honest with ourselves? You know, if we are keeping a food journal, are we really writing down everything we've eaten? Are we really identifying the quantities? Did we really count that extra whatever? And so that relationship component, you know, it's got to start with ourselves. But if we're not fueling this vessel that we have well, and we're not moving it and resting it well, it's not going to work for interaction with ourselves and interaction with other people and interaction with the world. I mean, you can't expect a car to drive properly down the road if you're not providing routine maintenance. And it seems like such a simple yet not always the most logical connection that people make.
Yeah. And with this, the analogy of the car, when you're driving, you could be the best driver, but there's always going to be someone else who isn't fueling their car. Maybe they've been neglecting a tire and it pops right in front of you. Now you're part of that relationship because now you just rear-ended somebody because of their neglect. So I know this sounds like kind of harsh, but you don't want to become a problem in someone else's life because you're neglecting yourself. You've been taking care of yourself. You're airing up all your tires. You've got a full tank of gas. Your windows are clear. You can see perfectly. You've done driver's ed, but the person in front of you isn't. And now they've created an obstacle in your life. And it's kind of like we have to take this responsibility for ourselves, that honesty of, are you actually doing the things that you need to do so that you can contribute positively to the world?
When you were talking about that idea, you mentioned it may sound harsh. Sometimes the truth is hard for us to hear, but we really do have to hear that if we want something to be different, we have to be willing to make the changes in order to get there. We can't expect, a room to be a different color if we're not going to take everything off the walls and paint it and then put it back together again, right? It doesn't just happen. Same thing happens with our bodies. How we feed and fuel, move and rest our bodies impacts how we think, how we feel, how we digest our food, how we're sleeping. And then we certainly can be, all of us have had moments where we have been hangry, and that idea of biting someone's head off just because we're hungry. Well, if you're in a constant state of not feeling well and being hungry or being tired or being stressed, then you are the thing that negatively impacts somebody else's day.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Real quick, I just want to say to our listeners, if you didn't listen to the first episode that Bridget and I recorded, and my apologies, we didn't do a full introduction in this episode, but for our listeners, Bridget owns a women-only kickboxing studio in Central California, and the slogan is Awaken the Lioness Within. I'd love to hear how that slogan plays into this whole idea of the 5 pillars of wellness.
Yeah, so the reason I chose the Lioness was because I love animals, first of all, but the Lioness is part of a pride, and a pride is the group of lions. Now, when we think of lions, we usually think of the big, pretty male with the long hair, but the male just kind of chills all day. It's the lionesses that do the work. They go out, they hunt for food, they take care of the young, they protect the pride. The lionesses, they work together. You'll see them lounging around like all together. The cubs are climbing on them. They're teaching the cubs what to do. When the lionesses go hunt, they do it as a group. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So if there is one lioness who is really fast, there's another one that's really maybe better at pouncing. There's one that's maybe better at tearing things apart. They will use each other. The fast one will maybe run around, tire out whatever they're chasing, while the other one waits. And they'll work together in order to feed their pride. And that relationship is a big thing. They're all working together in order to do that. They're protecting. So again, while they're sleeping, there's somebody protecting them. They have each other, right? Obviously movement. Some are better runners, some are better pouncers. And then of course the nutrition, they have to do all of this in order to feed themselves. So it all comes together and they're all working together, which is a big thing. We need community as humans. We have to have relationships and be able to have people to lean on, and also know that as women, when we're in groups, we are so powerful.
I was just having this conversation with some friends of mine. There's a handful of us that went to high school together that still, every month we try to get together and have dinner, lunch or something. And we were just talking about this, and I'm not sure how we got on the topic of it the other night, but I had recently read a study about the importance of female relationships, the importance of having your pride, the importance of having females around you who understand what it's like to be female, because it is inherently different than being a male in this world. Regardless of what culture you live in, the coast you live on, there are things that are inherently different about the roles that women take, as well as the way that our bodies work, right? I mean, men don't experience the hormonal changes and, the changes through pregnancy and perimenopause and menopause and just monthly, they don't experience those things. And relationships are very different in female groups than they are in male groups. And I love that you are creating that community within the work that you do. And I'm curious, how do you see people overcoming that if they are someone who maybe has a difficult time making relationships, engaging in other female relationship dynamics, or maybe they've recently moved to the area and they don't have those connections? How do you see people are overcoming that?
That is so difficult. And I'm someone that deals with that as well. It's funny because I created a place for other people to come together, but then I also have the boundary of like, hold on, you're the boss, you can't be best friends with everyone. And our class sizes are pretty small. We know everybody by name. And once we get to know people, we'll be like, you should talk to so-and-so. Like, you have a lot in common. And even if they only see each other twice a week for their workout, that's twice a week that they wouldn't otherwise. And it just eventually, sometimes people will meet outside of class and just like create these relationships that they're health involved. They met them in a healthy environment where health is like top of mind. But making female relationships as an adult is so difficult, especially if they're new to the area. So the best advice that I could say is know what you want from a female relationship. And I hate to say it, but like, don't settle for something that you don't want. Because it's just like any other relationship. You're going to spend a lot of time with that person, and you're only going to be as good as the people you surround yourself with. Go to as many events as you can. Talk to people. If you're not feeling the vibe, like, it's okay.
Well, and you mentioned that the people that are in your classes are creating relationships based on health, because obviously they're in a workout, exercise class. And so, I would just piggyback on what you said about like going to events and stuff. If you want to improve the 5 pillars of your wellness in your life, it's probably not the best to go to a bar every Friday and Saturday night to try to meet new friends or to socialize with people, right? It's probably going to be more like going to an exercise class or a yoga class, or, if there's a wellness fair or some kind of an event that is really focusing around those things, so that, the people that are interested in health and wellness are going to be at those events, rather than building relationships with people that are doing things that may not be exactly what you want to be firming up, solidifying in your life.
Exactly.
And then we have, that you already have something in common, right? If that's what you're looking for, and you're finding people who are also looking for that.
Yes. And that's exactly what I was going to say, was that if you're there and they're there, you already have something in common. So it's easier to spark conversation because you're both there for the same reason.
Yeah. So when we started the episode, we were talking about kind of implementation, and you had said that for you and with the clients that you work with, you think that food and nutrition is kind of the place to start, because as you feed and fuel your body well, you're feeling more primed, we'll say, to then move your body. What might be some of your, just like the go-to, if you had, like an elevator speech to give to somebody in terms of where to start with regards to nutrition?
Make sure to have a fruit or vegetable at every meal. And don't skip breakfast. That's
So fruit
my
or vegetable?
biggest things. Yes. If it's
Okay.
a fruit or vegetable, go for it. I mean, veggies are awesome, but some people hate vegetables. So I'm like, all right, well, don't put pressure on yourself. As long as it is a fruit or a vegetable, if it grows on a plant, go for that option.
Okay. So as a starting point, fruit or vegetable with every meal. Don't skip breakfast. Gosh, that's a big one for people.
Yeah. Or people think they're doing the right thing by skipping breakfast because they're delaying their hunger, but that goes into a whole other thing. So sorry, I have like some funny ways of describing things because people remember it that way. So I'm going to talk about carbohydrates, which are the body's preferred energy source. When we eat carbohydrates, we have more energy to use. So when people skip breakfast, they're delaying their meals until lunchtime, let's say. So from, I don't know, they stop eating at 8 o'clock at night. From 8 o'clock till noon, they are essentially not consuming energy to use for that day. So they eat lunch and then they eat their last meal, let's say 7:30, 8 o'clock, because now they're hungry up until they go to bed. What do you need energy for at night? I mean, I'm not here to judge, but, what are you needing energy to sleep for? What do you need energy for bed? Like, you don't. So starting eating, getting that energy throughout the morning is where you need it because you need that energy to get through your day. So eat breakfast. Just eat breakfast. It'll help everyone out. And then you're not hangry, like we had talked about. You're not hangry, so you're taking responsibility for your emotions as well.
Well, and I have heard people talk about intermittent fasting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea behind intermittent fasting isn't that you delay eating, but then you still eat, 3,000 calories worth of junk just in a 6-hour period instead of a 16-hour period. But
I know.
I really like the way that you explain that in terms of why are we energizing our body from noon to 8 when really we need to be energized from more like, 8 to 6. That makes a lot of sense. And then it doesn't put us into that, the witching hour of like 3 to 6 p.m. where we're trying to prepare dinner, but we're eating everything that we're chopping up or, eating chips while we're trying to prepare dinner, and makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And then when it comes to, I'm bringing up intermittent fasting. There's a lot of the studies are showing that, women, it creates more stress on our bodies to do that. I mean, everyone's different and every body reacts differently, but there comes that stress. And there comes the complications of like, now you're thinking about food when food, once, like I said, we want it to become a habit. We want those things to be a habit. So where you're thinking about that specific pillar all the time, when it should just kind of seamlessly blend into your life because it's something that we do every couple hours, every single day of our life. It's non-negotiable for every single human on the planet. So keep it simple.
Yeah. And when we think about habits are really supposed to be those things, like you just said, that we don't have to think about. I don't think about brushing my teeth. I just brush my teeth, and I'm not stressing about brushing my teeth. But it's entirely possible that all these other things I'm trying to do, they're not habits. They're things that I'm trying to do. Our listeners might have things that, we have these to-do lists and these habit trackers and all these things that are not yet habits because they're not easy for us to do. And then it increases our stress, which then makes us less resistant to the results of the activities and behaviors we're engaging in for the 5 pillars of wellness, right? Like it's this very vicious cycle.
Yes. Yep.
I feel like we potentially have opened ourselves up to another conversation kind of with regards to specifically for women, kind of how to not live in this steady state of stress, and how we can be the badass lioness that we were destined to be and not be totally, hurried and harried and stressed out the whole time we're trying to do that.
Absolutely.
So I know that we have, for our listeners, Bridget and I have some other podcast opportunities already on the schedule to record for you guys. I would love if you had some other ideas that you wanted us to talk about, send them to me, Jennifer@hopehealingtherapy.com. You can always send us a message on our socials as well. Bridget, before we tie up this last this episode here, any last minute thoughts that you want our listeners to have with regards to, the 5 pillars of wellness, implementing it, overcoming obstacles? What are your thoughts?
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. That's my biggest tip for anybody. Keep it simple. You don't need to overhaul your entire life.
Yeah. Small little steps we talked about, keeping it simple. Where can our listeners find you if they're like, they want to hear more from you or about you? We'll link it in the show notes too, but where can our listeners find you?
Yeah. So the studio is on Instagram at Awaken _Lompoc, LOMPOC. And then at our website, awakencardiokickboxing.com, you can find email and ways to reach us over there.
Awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm looking forward to some upcoming episodes that we already have queued up for you and I to record. And I appreciate our listeners tuning in today and would love to hear your thoughts, listeners, on this conversation or, again, more topics that you might want to hear us chat about. And I hope you all have a great day.
Bye.